My husband Lucas and his business partners humiliated me at the luxury car dealership, laughing as they handed me the repo notice and drove away in his Porsche. I disappeared that night. 3 years later, when he was desperately trying to save his failing dealership, I walked in and bought his dream car, a $250,000 Lamborghini, with cash, as the new owner of the city's largest automotive empire. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The champagne flute trembled slightly in my hand as I stood on the marble steps of Morrison Luxury Motors, the city's most prestigious automotive dealership. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Lucas frantically pacing behind his desk, his once confident swagger replaced by the desperate movements of a man watching his empire crumble. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years ago, I'd been the one trembling, humiliated, and abandoned in a parking lot just like this one. Now I owned it all. "Mrs. Talia Blackwood," the valet announced as he approached with the keys to my newest acquisition, a gleaming Lamborghini Aventador in midnight black, worth more than most people's houses. Lucas had dreamed of owning this exact car since we were college sweethearts. He'd shown me pictures countless times, describing every curve and specification with the passion most men reserved for their wives. Now it sat in my driveway, one of 17 luxury vehicles in my collection. The transformation still felt surreal sometimes. 3 years ago, I was Talia Morrison, the overlooked wife of a small-town car salesman who thought public humiliation was an acceptable form of entertainment. I wore bargain store clothes, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and believed my husband's constant reminders that I was lucky someone like him settled for someone like me. I cooked his meals, managed his appointments, and smiled politely when his business partners made jokes about my simple appearance at company events. That version of me died on a Tuesday afternoon in September, the day Lucas orchestrated what he called the perfect reality check. I can still remember the weight of the repo notice in my hands, the sound of his laughter echoing across the parking lot as he drove away with Monica, his secretary, leaving me stranded without my car, my purse, or my dignity. What he didn't know was that humiliation would become the catalyst for the most spectacular transformation of my life. The woman I became, Talia Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Automotive Holdings, controlled a network of luxury dealerships across 3 states. Forbes had featured me on their 40 under 40 list just last month. My net worth exceeded 8 figures, built from absolutely nothing through a combination of strategic brilliance, relentless determination, and an understanding of the automotive industry that even Lucas never possessed, despite his arrogance. But this moment, standing outside Morrison Luxury Motors with the keys to his dream car, wasn't really about the money or the success. It was about the look I'd seen on Lucas's face an hour earlier, when I'd walked into his showroom for the first time in 3 years. The color had drained from his cheeks so completely I thought he might faint. His mouth had opened and closed several times before any sound emerged, and when it did, it was barely a whisper. Talia. The recognition had been delayed. 3 years had changed me that dramatically. The mousy brown hair had been replaced by a sophisticated blonde bob, styled by the same team that worked with Manhattan socialites. The bargain store clothes had given way to a custom Armani suit that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in 6 months. But more than the external changes, something fundamental had shifted in how I carried myself. I no longer apologized for taking up space. I no longer smiled to make others comfortable at my own expense. I looked people in the eye and spoke with the authority of someone who had built something extraordinary from ashes. "I'd like to purchase the Lamborghini," I had told the sales manager, Alden, whose jaw dropped when I mentioned paying cash. Lucas had stood frozen behind the service counter, watching the transaction unfold with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. When Alden mentioned the price, $247,000, I hadn't even blinked. I'd simply opened my Hermes handbag and produced a cashier's check. The papers were signed within an hour. As I prepared to leave, Lucas had finally found his voice again. "Talia, we need to talk. I don't understand what's happening here. Where have you been? How did you—" I had turned to face him one final time, noting how much smaller he seemed. Then I remembered. The swagger that had once intimidated me now appeared pathetic. The confidence revealed as nothing more than a bully's bluster. "I've been building the life I deserve, Lucas. Something you told me I was incapable of." "But the car, the money, this doesn't make sense. You were just—" "Just what?" I interrupted, my voice carrying the quiet authority I'd developed over 3 years of commanding boardrooms. "Just the wife you thought you could discard like a broken-down vehicle? Just the woman you left humiliated in a parking lot because you thought it would be amusing?" His face had gone pale again. Behind him, I noticed Monica watching from the reception desk, her expression carefully neutral. She looked older than I remembered, stress lines visible around her eyes. The years hadn't been as kind to Lucas's choices as they had been to mine. "You remember that day, don't you, Lucas?" I continued, my voice never rising above conversational level. "September 15th, 3 years ago. You handed me that repo notice like it was a birthday gift. You and your friends laughed as you drove away, leaving me standing in this very parking lot without my car, without my purse, without any way to get home. You thought you were teaching me a lesson about my place in the world." The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of that memory. Other customers and employees had begun to notice our conversation, though I kept my voice low enough to maintain privacy. "You were right about one thing," I said finally. "That day did teach me about my place in the world, just not the lesson you intended." I held up the keys to the Lamborghini, letting them catch the light. My place, as it turns out, is at the top. Now, standing outside his dealership with his dream car, I realized that revenge had never been the goal. The goal had been freedom. Freedom from his limitations, his cruelty, his small-minded view of what I was capable of achieving. The success, the money, the empire I'd built, those were just happy consequences of refusing to accept his definition of my worth. The real victory wasn't the car or the business empire. It was the fact that seeing him again had stirred nothing but mild curiosity. The man who had once controlled my entire sense of self-worth now seemed like a stranger from someone else's life. That, I realized as I drove away in my new Lamborghini, was the sweetest triumph of all. But to understand how that broken woman in the parking lot became the CEO driving away in a $250,000 car, you need to know the whole story. It begins 3 years and 4 days ago, with a discovery that shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The email notification chimed at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon, the sound cutting through the quiet hum of our home office, like a knife. I was organizing Lucas's business files, a task I'd volunteered for to help him prepare for the quarterly tax meeting with his accountant. As his wife and unofficial office manager, I handled most of his administrative work while he focused on sales at Morrison Motors, the small but profitable dealership his father had passed down to him. I wasn't supposed to be using his computer, but mine had crashed that morning, and I needed to print invoices before the weekend. Lucas had rushed out to show a customer a used BMW, kissing my cheek absently and mumbling something about being back by dinner. In his haste, he'd forgotten to log out of his email account, something that, in 12 years of marriage, had never happened before. The message preview made my blood freeze. "Can't wait to celebrate your freedom this weekend. Once the repo plan works, she'll be so broken she won't fight the divorce. Then we can finally stop hiding. M." My fingers trembled as I clicked the email open, revealing a thread that stretched back months. Monica Vance, his secretary at the dealership, wasn't just his employee. The intimate messages laid out a relationship that had been flourishing while I cooked dinner and asked about his day. But this wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated plan to destroy me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I scrolled through, message after message, each one revealing another layer of their scheme. Photos from weekend trips I thought Lucas had taken alone for dealer conferences. Hotel reservations made with company credit cards. Most devastating of all, a detailed discussion of how they planned to stage a repo of my car to humiliate me, so thoroughly that I would accept whatever divorce terms he offered without question. The repo notice will be fake, of course, Lucas had written in one message. But she'll be so mortified, especially in front of Sonny and Francis, she'll just want to disappear. Perfect setup for telling her I want out of this marriage. She'll be too devastated to think clearly about lawyers or settlements. Monica's response chilled me to the bone. Brilliant. She's always been so pathetic and dependent. After a public humiliation like that, she'll probably just take whatever you offer and slink away. Then we can finally have the life we deserve. They discussed my weaknesses like I was a problem to be solved rather than a human being. My shyness, my financial dependence, my tendency to apologize for everything, all weaponized against me. They'd even planned the exact location, the parking lot of Premier Auto Plaza, the upscale dealership across town where Lucas often took clients. The humiliation would be witnessed by people in the automotive community who knew us both. The plan was set for the following Tuesday. Lucas would tell me he needed help delivering papers to a client at Premier Auto. Once there, his business partners Sonny and Francis would approach with a fake repo notice, claiming my car was being seized for missed payments. Lucas would act, surprised and angry, publicly berating me for hiding financial problems and embarrassing him in front of colleagues. The performance would be so convincing that even the witnesses would believe I was at fault. As I continued reading, I discovered the depth of his financial manipulation. For months, Lucas had been transferring money from our joint savings account into a separate account I knew nothing about. The mortgage payments I thought he was making from his dealership income were actually being paid from my inheritance, money my grandmother had left me that I'd entrusted to him to invest safely. She has no idea about the separate account. He'd written to Monica. By the time she realizes what's happening, I'll have moved everything. Her inheritance money has been funding our trips this whole year. It's poetic justice, really. Her dead grandmother's money paying for my happiness. Monica's response made my stomach turn. You're so smart, baby. She's always been too trusting for her own good. After the repo show, she'll be so grateful for whatever crumbs you offer. She won't think to ask about finances. The final email in the thread was sent just that morning. Everything's set for Tuesday. Sonny and Francis know their parts. The fake repo paperwork looks official. Francis's cousin works at a repossession company and helped us make it authentic. Your pathetic wife won't know what hit her. Can't wait to see her face when she realizes her car is gone and she's stranded. The ride home should be fun when you tell her you want a divorce. I sat staring at the screen for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. 12 years of marriage, and I had been nothing more than a convenient placeholder until something better came along. Every I love you, every anniversary dinner, every shared dream, all lies. He had been planning to discard me like an unwanted trade-in, and he'd recruited his friends to help orchestrate my public humiliation. But what hurt? Most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was reading their assessment of who I was. Pathetic, dependent, too weak to fight back. They expected me to crumble, to accept whatever scraps they offered, to slink away in shame. In their minds, I was incapable of anything more than quiet surrender. I printed every email, every bank statement I could access, every piece of evidence of their plan. As the pages emerged from the printer, I felt something shifting inside me. Not just anger, but a crystalline clarity I'd never experienced before. They were right about one thing. The woman they described would indeed crumble under their scheme. She would be too devastated to think clearly. too ashamed to fight back, too dependent to imagine any other life. But that woman didn't have to exist after Tuesday. She could die in that parking lot along with their plan, replaced by someone they clearly hadn't considered possible, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The printer finished its work with a mechanical whir. I gathered the papers, each sheet evidence of not just their betrayal, but their fatal underestimation of what I was capable of becoming. As I heard Lucas's car pulling into the driveway, I closed his email and arranged myself at my desk, the picture of the dutiful wife organizing invoices. He would never suspect that his moment of carelessness had just signed the death warrant for the life he thought he controlled. The sound of Lucas's key in the front door sent my heart hammering against my ribs, but I forced my hands to remain steady as I continued organizing the invoices spread across the desk. The printed emails lay hidden beneath a stack of tax documents, their weight seeming to burn through the paper above them. I had perhaps 30 seconds to compose myself before he walked into the office. "Hey, honey," Lucas called from the hallway, his voice carrying that casual warmth he'd perfected over 12 years of marriage. "Sorry I'm running late. The Hendersons were more interested in that BMW than I expected. Ended up taking them for a test drive that lasted 2 hours." I looked up with what I hoped was my usual smile. "That's wonderful. Did they buy it?" Still thinking it over, but I'm optimistic. He appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie with the same gesture I'd watched him perform thousands of times. How many of those times had he been thinking about Monica? Planning his escape from our marriage? "How's the paperwork coming along?" "Almost finished," I replied, gesturing to the neat stacks I'd created. "Your accountant should have everything he needs for the quarterly review." Lucas nodded absently, already reaching for his phone. As he scrolled through his messages, probably checking for texts from Monica, I studied his face with new eyes. The strong jawline I'd once found so attractive now seemed weak, indecisive. The confident smile appeared practiced, hollow. Had I been this blind for years, or had I simply chosen not to see? "I'm thinking we should go out for dinner tonight," he said suddenly, looking up from his phone. That new Italian place downtown, my treat. The suggestion felt loaded with meaning now that I knew what was coming. Was this part of his plan? A final romantic evening before he destroyed my life? Or perhaps he wanted to establish an alibi. The loving husband who took his wife to dinner just days before her shocking behavior at the car dealership. "That sounds lovely," I heard myself say. "Should I make a reservation?" "Already did," he replied, confirming my suspicions. 7:30. Figured we deserved a nice night out. As he headed toward the bedroom to change clothes, I quickly covered the hidden emails with more paperwork and followed him upstairs. Our bedroom felt different. Now, like a stage set for a play I hadn't known I was performing in. The wedding photo on Lucas's dresser, us laughing at our reception 12 years ago, seemed like evidence of a crime. Had he been planning this betrayal even then, or had it developed gradually? I watched him select a shirt from his closet, noting how he chose the blue one Monica had complimented him on at the Christmas party. Every action now seemed calculated, every choice a potential clue to his deception. "You're quiet tonight," Lucas observed as he buttoned his shirt. "Everything okay?" The irony of his concern was almost laughable. "Just tired, I guess. It's been a long week." "Well, dinner will be relaxing. No talk about work or bills or any of that stress. Just us." He moved behind me and placed his hands on my shoulders, meeting my eyes in the dresser mirror. "I love you, Talia. I hope you know that." The words that once would have made me melt now felt like razor blades. I forced myself to lean back against him, playing the role of the trusting wife. "I love you too." But as I said it, I realized something profound. I didn't. Not anymore. The love I'd felt for Lucas had been based on the man I thought he was. Honest, loyal, someone who saw value in the quiet life we'd built together. That man had never existed. The real Lucas was a stranger who saw me as an obstacle to dispose of, a problem to solve with calculated cruelty. At dinner, I watched him perform the part of the devoted husband with masterful precision. He asked about my day, complimented my dress, shared amusing stories from the dealership. To any observer, we looked like a happily married couple enjoying an evening out. The performance was so convincing that I almost understood how I'd missed the deception for so long. "You seem distracted," he said over dessert, reaching across to touch my hand. "Are you sure everything's all right?" I met his eyes, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in years. "Just thinking about the future," I replied truthfully. "What about it? How quickly things can change. How the life you think you have can disappear overnight." Lucas's grip on my hand tightened slightly. "That's a morbid thought. Our life isn't going anywhere, Talia. We're solid." The lie rolled off his tongue so easily that I wondered if he even registered it as deception anymore. How long had he been living this double life? How many conversations like this had we had while he planned my destruction behind the scenes? "You're right," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm probably just overthinking things." "That's my girl," he replied, squeezing my hand before releasing it. "Always worrying about problems that don't exist." But I wasn't worrying about problems that didn't exist. I was finally seeing the problem that had existed all along. I had spent 12 years of my life loving a man who was incapable of loving me back. Not because he was broken or damaged, but because he was fundamentally selfish. I was a convenience to him, a supporting character in the story of his life, useful until something better came along. The revelation was devastating and liberating in equal measure. Devastating because it meant 12 years of my life had been built on a foundation of lies. Liberating because it meant I had no obligation to protect what we'd built together. If Lucas could plan to destroy me without a second thought, then I owed him nothing in return. As we drove home, Lucas chatted about weekend plans and upcoming events at the dealership. I nodded and responded appropriately while my mind raced. Ahead to Tuesday, he expected to find a broken, helpless woman in that parking lot, someone who would crumble under public humiliation and accept whatever terms he offered. What he would find instead, I was beginning to realize, would be something entirely different. The woman who had loved him unconditionally was about to die in that parking lot. But what emerged from her ashes would be something Lucas had never considered possible. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The game was set for Tuesday, but Lucas had made one critical error in his planning. He had underestimated his opponent so completely that he hadn't bothered to consider what might happen if she refused to play by his rules. The next morning, Lucas left early for what he claimed was a breakfast meeting with a potential commercial client. I waited until his car disappeared around the corner before retrieving the printed emails from their hiding place. Reading them again in the harsh light of day, I felt my resolve crystallizing into something harder and colder than mere anger. But I needed more than email evidence. If I was going to protect myself from whatever legal and financial traps Lucas had set, I needed to understand the full scope of his deception. I opened his laptop again, this time methodically searching through every file, every browser history entry, every saved document. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Hidden in a folder labeled Tax Documents 2019 were screenshots of dating profiles Lucas had created on 3 different websites. The photos were recent, some taken during what I'd thought were solo fishing trips last summer. His relationship status was listed as divorced on 2 sites, separated on the 3rd. The profiles painted a picture of a successful businessman, looking for a genuine connection with someone who shares his passion for the finer things in life. One profile included details that made my stomach turn. Recently freed from a marriage that had run its course, looking for a partner who appreciates success and isn't content with a mundane suburban existence. The description of his ideal match could have been written as Monica's biography. I scrolled through message conversations with dozens of women, most dating back 8 months. Lucas hadn't just been planning to leave me, he'd been actively shopping for my replacement while sleeping in our bed every night. Monica wasn't his first affair. She was simply the one who'd stuck around long enough to help him orchestrate my destruction. But the most damaging discovery was a consultation agreement with a divorce attorney dated 6 weeks ago. The document outlined a strategy for minimizing Lucas's financial obligations in divorce proceedings. The lawyer's notes were clinical in their assessment of our marriage. Client married to unemployed spouse with no significant income history. Spouse inherited approximately $180,000 from grandmother. Funds currently commingled in joint accounts. Strategy: establish pattern of spouse's financial irresponsibility through documentation. Create grounds for claiming emotional abandonment. Minimize asset division through pre-divorce asset protection measures. My inheritance, the money my grandmother had saved her entire life and left to me as security, had been systematically moved into accounts I couldn't access. The irresponsible spending they planned to document was actually Lucas's secret funding of his relationship with Monica. Every romantic dinner, every weekend getaway, every piece of jewelry he'd given her had been purchased with my money. The consultation notes continued. Client reports spouse is emotionally dependent and unlikely to contest reasonable settlement. Offer, particularly following precipitating incident planned for September 15th. Recommend offering 25% of marital assets and no spousal support. Subject likely to accept, rather than face prolonged litigation. They weren't just planning to humiliate me. They were planning to steal everything my grandmother had worked for and leave me with barely enough to survive. The repo scheme wasn't just about breaking my spirit. It was about establishing a narrative of my incompetence that would hold up in divorce court. I printed everything, creating a file that revealed not just Lucas's infidelity, but his financial fraud. As the pages emerged from the printer, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. Without evidence of his deception, I would emerge from this divorce exactly as broken and destitute as they'd planned. The sound of a car in the driveway sent me scrambling to hide the evidence, but instead of Lucas's sedan, I saw Monica's red convertible pulling up to our house. She sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, checking her appearance in the rearview mirror before walking to our front door. I watched from the upstairs window as she used a key, our spare key that Lucas kept hidden under the garden gnome, to let herself into my home. The casual way she entered, as if she belonged there, suggested this wasn't her first uninvited visit. How many times had she been in our house while I was out running errands or visiting my sister? From my position at the top of the stairs, I could hear her moving through the kitchen, opening cabinets and the refrigerator like she lived there. The audacity was breathtaking, but it also provided an opportunity. If I could document her presence in our home, it would strengthen my case. For adultery and potentially void any prenuptial agreements Lucas might try to enforce. I quietly retrieved my phone and began recording as Monica made herself comfortable at our kitchen table, using our dishes and eating food I had purchased. She was clearly waiting for Lucas, probably planning to celebrate their upcoming victory over lunch in my own home. 20 minutes later, Lucas's car returned. I watched from the window as he hurried inside, greeting Monica with a kiss that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Their voices carried up the stairs as they discussed final preparations for Tuesday's performance. Sonny confirmed he has the fake repo paperwork, Lucas was saying. Francis practiced his angry creditor act last night. It's going to be perfect. I almost feel sorry for her, Monica replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. She has no idea what's coming. She'll thank us eventually, Lucas said. This marriage has been holding both of us back. Tuesday, we set everyone free. As I listened to them plan my destruction while sitting at my kitchen table, something fundamental shifted inside me. The woman they were discussing, passive, helpless, grateful for whatever scraps they offered, deserved the fate they'd planned for her. But I was no longer that woman. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. That weekend, while Lucas attended what he claimed was a dealer conference in the state capital, I began preparing for my own disappearance. He'd left Friday morning with 2 suitcases, kissing my cheek and promising to bring me back something nice from the hotel gift shop. I knew he was actually spending the weekend with Monica at some romantic getaway, funded by my grandmother's money. The house felt different without his presence, not empty, but cleared of a toxic energy I hadn't realized was there. For the first time in months, I could think clearly without the constant undercurrent of his subtle manipulations and casual dismissals. I started with the practical necessities. Our joint bank accounts contained $12,000, but I knew Lucas could freeze them the moment he wanted to. I began making small withdrawals, $200 here, $300 there, from different ATMs around town. Nothing large enough to trigger alerts, but enough to build a small emergency fund. By Sunday evening, I had accumulated $2,800 in cash hidden in an envelope taped under my jewelry box. The jewelry itself represented another resource. My engagement ring was worth at least $8,000. Lucas had bragged about the price often enough during our early marriage. The pearl necklace from my grandmother, the diamond earrings from our 5th anniversary, the sapphire bracelet Lucas had given me last Christmas while he was already planning my destruction. All of it could be converted to cash if necessary. But money was only part of the equation. I needed documentation, evidence, and a plan that would protect me from whatever legal machinations Lucas had prepared. I spent Saturday night scanning and copying every important document in our house: birth, certificates, social security cards, tax returns, insurance policies, and the deed to our home. The deed was particularly revealing. Despite my contributing my inheritance to the down payment, the house was titled solely in Lucas's name. Another trap I'd walked into with trusting stupidity. I created multiple copies of everything, storing them in different locations. One set went into a safety deposit box at a bank across town. One was mailed to my sister Sienna in Colorado, and one was hidden in my old college textbooks in the basement, books Lucas would never think to examine. The most challenging task was researching divorce attorneys without leaving a digital trail. I couldn't use our home computer. Lucas might check the browser history. Instead, I drove to the public library, claiming I needed to research genealogy for a family tree project. The librarian, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson, helped me navigate the legal databases. What I learned was sobering. Nevada's divorce laws would indeed favor Lucas if he could establish my financial irresponsibility and emotional instability. The fake repo incident would provide perfect evidence for both claims. However, if I could prove adultery and financial fraud, the equation changed dramatically. Nevada courts took a dim view of spouses who hid assets or used marital funds for extramarital relationships. I printed contact information for 3 highly rated divorce attorneys, all women with reputations, for aggressive representation of wronged spouses. I also researched private investigators, understanding that I would need professional help to document the full extent of Lucas's deception. Sunday evening brought the most emotionally difficult preparation, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. I couldn't take much without arousing suspicion, but there were things I couldn't bear to lose. My grandmother's recipe book, handwritten in her careful script. The photo albums from my childhood, before Lucas entered my life and began erasing who I used to be. A small wooden jewelry box my father had made for me before he died when I was 16. Each item I selected felt like choosing what parts of my identity were worth saving. The woman I'd been for the past 12 years was largely Lucas's creation, quiet, apologetic, grateful for his attention. But underneath that constructed identity were fragments of who I'd been before. An honor student, a girl who'd dreamed, of opening her own bookstore, someone who believed she deserved to be truly loved rather than merely tolerated. As I carefully packed these treasures into a small bag, I realized I wasn't just planning an escape. I was planning a resurrection. Monday. Morning. Lucas returned from his conference with a cheap snow globe from a tourist trap and stories about boring seminars that matched nothing in the conference brochures I'd looked up online. He seemed relaxed, energized, probably from his romantic weekend with Monica. The lies flowed so easily from his lips that I wondered if he even remembered what was true anymore. "How was your weekend, honey?" he asked, settling into his favorite chair with a beer. "Do anything interesting?" "Just the usual," I replied, serving him the pot roast dinner I'd prepared. "Caught up on some reading, organized the closets. Nothing exciting." He nodded absently, already checking his phone for messages from Monica. As I watched him eat the meal I'd cooked while planning my destruction, I felt a strange sense of peace. Tomorrow, he would execute his plan to break me. What he didn't know was that the woman he planned to destroy had already died over the weekend. The woman who would wake up Tuesday morning was someone entirely new. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Tuesday morning dawned. Gray and overcast, matching my mood as I prepared what I knew would be my final breakfast in this kitchen. Lucas hummed tunelessly while shaving in the bathroom, the sound drifting down the hallway with an almost manic cheerfulness. He was excited about today, excited to watch me crumble, excited to finally be free of the burden I represented in his life. I made his favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with maple syrup and crispy bacon. As I flipped each pancake, I wondered if this was how condemned prisoners felt preparing their last meal. Everything felt surreal, heightened, as if I were watching someone else's life through thick glass. "Smells amazing in here," Lucas said, appearing in the kitchen freshly showered and wearing his best suit. He'd chosen the charcoal gray one I'd given him for our 10th anniversary, paired with the silk tie Monica had admired at the dealership Christmas party. Even his cologne was stronger than usual. He was dressing for her, not for whatever fake business meeting he'd used to lure me to Premier Auto Plaza. "Special occasion?" I asked, setting his plate in front of him. "Just felt like looking sharp today," he replied, cutting into his pancakes with enthusiasm. "You know how it is in sales. Image is everything." I nodded and poured myself coffee, noting how his hands trembled slightly with anticipation. This was it. The day he'd been planning for months. In his mind, by evening, I would be a broken woman, grateful for whatever scraps of a life he offered me. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt an odd sense of calm. "Actually, I'm glad you're dressed up," Lucas continued, glancing at my simple jeans and sweater. "I need you to come with me to Premier Auto today. That client I've been working with, Mr. Davidson, wants to finalize the deal on the luxury set and package, but he has some specific questions about financing options that I think you could help explain." The lie was smooth, practiced. Lucas knew I had a head for numbers and had often helped him prepare financing presentations for nervous customers. Under normal circumstances, I would have been flattered that he valued my input on an important sale. "Of course," I replied. "When do we need to leave?" "Around 11:30. The appointment's at noon, but I want to get there early to set up." He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "You might want to dress up a bit more, though. Davidson's the type who judges people by appearances, and this sale could really help us out financially." Another lie wrapped in enough truth to make it believable. There was no Mr. Davidson, no important sale, but Lucas had always been image conscious, around other dealers. His suggestion that I change clothes was probably genuine. He wanted me to look respectable when his friends humiliated me in front of the Premier Auto staff. "I'll change after I finish the dishes," I said. "Thanks, honey. You're the best." He reached across to squeeze my hand, and I forced myself not to flinch at his touch. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The irony was breathtaking. In a few hours, he would find out exactly what he'd do without me. And it wouldn't be what he expected. I spent the next hour playing the role of the dutiful wife one final time. I washed his breakfast dishes, straightened his tie, listened to him practice his fake sales pitch for the non-existent Mr. Davidson. Every gesture felt like a performance, a goodbye to the woman I'd been for 12 years. In our bedroom, I selected my outfit carefully. The navy blue dress Lucas had bought me for last year's dealership awards dinner, the one that made me look presentable, according to his backhanded compliment. I paired it with my grandmother's pearl necklace and the earrings Lucas had given me for our anniversary. If I was going to be publicly humiliated, I would at least look dignified while it happened. As I applied lipstick in the bathroom mirror, I caught sight of the small travel bag I'd hidden behind my winter coats in the closet. Everything I needed for my new life was packed in that bag: cash, documents, a change of clothes, and the few irreplaceable mementos I couldn't leave behind. Tonight, when Lucas returned home expecting to find a broken woman ready to accept his divorce terms, he would find empty closets and a note explaining that his plan had worked better than he'd imagined. It had indeed freed me from our marriage. "Ready to go?" Lucas called from downstairs. "Just a minute," I replied, taking one last look at the woman in the mirror. She looked the same as always, neat, modest, unremarkable. By tomorrow, she would be gone forever, replaced by someone Lucas couldn't even imagine. I walked downstairs to find Lucas jingling his car keys impatiently by the front door. "Perfect timing," he said, giving me an approving once-over. "You look great. Davidson will be impressed." "I hope so," I replied, grabbing my purse and checking that my phone was charged. I would need it to call my ride after Lucas and his friends finished their performance. As we drove toward Premier Auto Plaza, Lucas chatted nervously about the weather, traffic, anything except what was really about to happen. I watched the familiar streets pass by, memorizing details of the town I would never see again. This wasn't just my last day as Lucas's wife. It was my last day as Talia Morrison entirely. The woman who would emerge from that parking lot would be someone completely new. Premier Auto Plaza sat on the corner of 5th and Meridian, like a gleaming monument to automotive excess. Luxury vehicles worth more than most people's houses sparkled under the afternoon sun, their chrome details catching the light like jewelry. Lucas pulled into the parking lot with practiced ease, choosing a spot near the main showroom where we would be visible to anyone inside. "Perfect," he muttered under his breath, then louder. "Davidson said he'd meet us by the main entrance. Should be here any minute." I nodded, checking my watch. 12:03 p.m. Lucas seemed unusually tense, drumming his fingers against the steering wheel and glancing repeatedly at the side mirrors. His phone buzzed with a text message, and I caught a glimpse of Monica's name before he quickly closed it. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just Davidson confirming the time," Lucas replied, the lie rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. "Why don't we get out and wait for him? He prefers to handle these conversations in person rather than over the phone." We stepped out of the car into the crisp September air. The parking lot was busy with customers browsing the outdoor displays, sales staff in sharp suits guiding potential buyers between rows of pristine vehicles. I recognized several faces from the automotive community, people who knew Lucas professionally, who would witness whatever was about to unfold. "There he is," Lucas said suddenly, pointing toward two men approaching from across the parking lot. But these weren't potential customers. I recognized them immediately: Sonny Martinez and Francis Webb, Lucas's business partners from various deals over the years. Sonny owned a small used car lot on the south side of town, while Francis ran an auto repair shop that specialized in high-end vehicles. Both men looked unusually serious, their expressions grim as they walked toward us with purposeful strides. "Lucas Morrison?" Sonny called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot loud enough to attract attention from nearby customers and staff. "That's me," Lucas replied, feigning confusion perfectly. "Sonny, what are you guys doing here?" Francis was carrying a manila folder, and as they approached, he opened it to reveal official-looking documents. "We need to speak with you about your wife's vehicle," he announced, his voice projecting with theatrical authority. "There's been a significant issue with the loan payments." I felt my stomach drop, even though I knew this was all performance. The fear response was involuntary, triggered by years of conditioning to trust my husband and his friends. Several people in the parking lot had turned to watch, including 2 sales representatives from Premier Auto who stood near the showroom entrance. "I don't understand," Lucas said, his acting flawless. "What issue? We've never missed a payment." "Ma'am," Sonny addressed me directly, pulling out a document that looked convincingly official. "Are you Talia Morrison, registered owner of a 2018 Honda Accord? License plate Nevada 7G49021? "Yes," I whispered, playing my expected role of confused victim. "I'm afraid we're here to repossess your vehicle," Francis announced, loud enough for everyone in the immediate area to hear. "This notice shows 3 missed payments totaling $1,847 plus fees and penalties. The total amount due is $2,203. The papers he showed me looked authentic. Professional letterhead, official stamps, legal language that seemed genuine. Lucas's friend at the repossession company had done excellent work creating the fake documentation. "That's impossible," I protested, my voice shaking with what appeared to be genuine distress. "We don't have any missed payments. Lucas handles all the finances." Lucas stepped forward, his face reddening with what looked like authentic anger. "Talia, what the hell is going on? How could you miss car payments without telling me?" "I didn't miss any payments," I insisted, tears welling in my eyes, though whether from genuine hurt or playing my part, I couldn't say. "I don't understand what's happening." "Mrs. Morrison," Sonny said with mock sympathy, "I understand this is upsetting, but the documentation is clear. Your vehicle is being seized effective immediately. Do you have the keys?" By now, we had attracted a substantial audience. The 2 Premier Auto salespeople had been joined by several customers, all watching our domestic drama unfold with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. I could see some of them whispering among themselves, probably recognizing Lucas from the local automotive community. "Give them the keys, Talia," Lucas said through gritted teeth, his embarrassment appearing completely genuine. "I can't believe you've been hiding this from me. Do you have any idea how this makes me look in front of my colleagues?" The cruelty in his voice was real, I realized. Even though this was his plan, his anger at being embarrassed wasn't entirely an act. He was genuinely furious at having to associate himself with someone he perceived as pathetic, even though he'd created the entire scenario. With trembling hands, I reached into my purse and pulled out my car keys. The weight of them felt impossibly heavy as I placed them in Francis's outstretched palm. "Thank you for your cooperation," he said with professional courtesy. "You'll receive information about retrieving personal items from the vehicle within 5 business days." As Sonny walked away to move my car, Lucas turned to me with a look of disgust that was far too authentic to be entirely performance. "Get in the car, Talia. We're going home. And then you're going to explain to me exactly how you've been lying about our finances." But I didn't move toward his car. Instead, I stood in the parking lot, surrounded by strangers who had witnessed my humiliation and felt something unexpected. Relief. The worst thing Lucas could imagine doing to me had just happened, and I was still standing. "Actually, Lucas," I said quietly, my voice carrying a strange new steadiness, "I think I'll find my own way home." The confusion that crossed his face was the first genuine expression I'd seen from him all day. The silence that followed my words stretched across the parking lot like a held breath. Lucas's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to something approaching panic. This wasn't part of his script. In his carefully orchestrated plan, I was supposed to be devastated, clinging to him for support, grateful for whatever comfort he might offer during the ride home where he would deliver the final blow of asking for a divorce. "What do you mean, find your own way home?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Talia, your car just got repossessed. How exactly are you planning to get home?" I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, noting how his eyes widened as I began dialing. "The same way millions of people get around every day, Lucas. I'll call a ride." "Don't be ridiculous," he snapped, grabbing for my arm. "Get in the car. We need to go home and figure out how to fix this mess you've created." I stepped back, avoiding his grasp, and felt something powerful surge through me. The first time in 12 years I had physically refused him anything. "I didn't create this mess, Lucas, but you're right about one thing. It definitely needs to be fixed." Sonny and Francis exchanged uncertain glances. Their part in the performance was supposed to be over, but I was deviating from the script in ways they hadn't prepared for. Other witnesses in the parking lot continued to watch our domestic drama unfold, their discomfort palpable as what should have been a private family crisis played out in public. "Ma'am," Sonny interjected, apparently trying to salvage the situation, "if there's been some kind of misunderstanding about the payments—" "Oh, there's definitely been a misunderstanding," I replied, meeting his eyes directly. "But not about payments, about people." My phone connected to the ride service app, and I quickly requested a pickup at Premier Auto Plaza. The estimated arrival time was 7 minutes. 7 minutes to hold my ground and resist Lucas's increasingly desperate attempts to control the I situation. "Talia, you're not thinking clearly," Lucas said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he used when he thought I was being irrational. "You're upset, and you're making a scene. These people don't need to see our personal business." "You're absolutely right," I agreed, surprising him. "They shouldn't have to see this, but you made that choice when you decided to stage this performance in a public parking lot." Francis shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to leave, but uncertain whether their charade was complete. "Maybe you should go," I said firmly. "Both of you. Your job here is finished." Something in my tone must have penetrated their confusion because they began backing away, muttering awkward goodbyes to Lucas. As they retreated, I noticed several of the onlookers beginning to disperse as well, sensing that whatever drama they'd witnessed was winding down, but Lucas wasn't finished. As the audience thinned, his desperation became more apparent. "Talia, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this attitude isn't helping anyone. Get in the car and we'll sort this out at home like civilized people." "Civilized," I repeated, tasting the word. "Is that what we're calling this?" "Calling what? I'm trying to help you deal with a crisis you created." The lie was so bold, so completely delivered, that I almost admired his commitment to the performance. But then I remembered the emails, the financial documents, the months of planning that had led to this moment, and my admiration curdled into something colder. "The only crisis here, Lucas, is that your plan isn't working the way you expected." "Plan? What plan?" "Talia, you're not making sense." A white sedan pulled into the parking lot, my ride arriving 2 minutes early. As it approached, I felt a surge of something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete control over my own circumstances. For the first time in 12 years, I was making a choice that wasn't influenced by Lucas's preferences, expectations, or manipulations. "That's my ride," I said, walking toward the approaching car. Lucas followed me, his voice rising. "You can't just leave. We came here together. We're going home together. That's how marriage works." I paused with my hand on the car door handle and turned to face him one last time. The man I'd loved for 12 years looked smaller somehow, diminished by his own desperation. The confident swagger that had once impressed me now appeared as what it had always been, a performance designed to mask deep insecurity. "You're right about marriage, Lucas. It's supposed to be about partnership, trust, and mutual respect. But what we've had hasn't been a marriage in a very long time. It's been a performance, and I'm tired of playing my part. I opened the car door and slid into the back seat, giving the driver an address across town. Not our home, but the bank where I'd opened my private safety deposit box. As the car pulled away, I watched Lucas through the rear window, standing, alone in the parking lot, his carefully orchestrated plan crumbling around him. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, moving forward, on my own terms, toward a future he couldn't control or manipulate. The woman who had arrived at Premier Auto Plaza as Talia Morrison was gone forever. The woman leaving was someone entirely new, someone who was about to discover just how much she was capable of when she stopped asking permission to exist. The Uber driver, a middle-aged man named Carlos, glanced at me in the rearview mirror as we pulled away from Premier Auto Plaza. "Everything okay back there? That looked pretty intense." "It was," I replied, watching Lucas's figure shrink in the distance. He was still standing in the parking lot, his phone pressed to his ear, probably calling Monica to report that their plan had gone sideways. "But it's over now." Carlos nodded diplomatically and turned up the radio, giving me space to process what had just happened. As we drove through downtown traffic, I felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. I had just walked away from my entire life with nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back. In any rational sense, I should have been panicking. Instead, I felt more clear-headed than I had in years. My first stop was First National Bank, where I retrieved the documents and cash from my safety deposit box. The bank manager, Mrs. Chen, noticed my shaking hands as I signed the access forms. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked with genuine concern. "I'm getting divorced," I said simply. It was the first time I'd spoken the words aloud, and they felt both foreign and liberating. Mrs. Chen's expression softened with understanding. "Do you need any assistance with your accounts? Sometimes there are complications during these transitions." Her delicate phrasing told me she'd seen this scenario before, spouses scrambling to protect their assets before an acrimonious split. "Actually, yes. I need to open a new account in my name only and transfer some funds before my husband has a chance to freeze our joint accounts." Within an hour, I had moved $2,800 from our joint savings into a new account Lucas knew nothing about. It wasn't much, but combined with the cash I'd already withdrawn and the jewelry I could sell, it would give me options. My second stop was the pawn shop on Riverside Drive. The elderly owner, Mr. Kovac, examined my engagement ring with a jeweler's loupe while I fidgeted in the uncomfortable plastic chair across from his desk. "It's a nice stone," he said finally. 2 carats, good clarity. The setting is quality, too. I can offer you $6,000. $6,000 was less than Lucas had paid, but it was real money I could access immediately. "I'll take it." As Mr. Kovac prepared the paperwork, I twisted my wedding band off my finger. After 12 years, the tan line beneath it looked pale and strange, like archaeological evidence of a life I was leaving behind. "This too," I said, placing the band on his desk. He examined it briefly. "Another $800 for this one. Simple gold band, but good weight." I nodded, signing papers that felt like signing my own death certificate and birth certificate simultaneously. When I walked out of Kovac's shop, I had $6,800 in cash and bare fingers that felt impossibly light. My phone had been buzzing constantly with calls and texts from Lucas, but I didn't answer. Instead, I took another Uber to the Greyhound station, downtown. The terminal was exactly as grim as I'd expected. Fluorescent lighting, hard plastic seats, and the lingering smell of industrial disinfectant. But it was also anonymous, a place where someone could disappear without leaving a trail. "Where to?" asked the ticket agent, a bored-looking woman with elaborate nail art. I had been thinking about this during the ride. Not Florida, where my sister lived. Too obvious. Not California. Too expensive. But there was a city I'd always wanted to visit. a place that represented reinvention and possibility. Portland, Oregon, I said. One way. Next bus leaves at 11:20 p.m., she replied, printing my ticket. That's a 38-hour trip with connections. You sure about this? I'm sure. I spent the afternoon in a nearby coffee shop, using their Wi-Fi to research Portland. Rental markets, job opportunities, what someone could build from nothing in a city where nobody knew their history. The research felt like planning for someone else's life, which in a way it was. At 6 p.m., my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Talia? It was Monica's voice, syrupy with fake concern. Lucas is worried sick about you. He said you had some kind of breakdown at the car lot. Today? We think you should come home so we can help you work through whatever's happening. The audacity was breathtaking. She was calling to manipulate me back into their trap, using my husband's phone to do it. Monica, I said calmly, you can tell Lucas that his plan worked perfectly. I am having a breakdown of every illusion I had about our marriage. And you're right that I should come home. I am coming home, just not to the one I shared. With him. I hung up before she could respond and turned off my phone. Whatever they said or did now was irrelevant. In 5 hours, I would be on a bus heading west, leaving behind not just Lucas and Monica, but Talia Morrison entirely. As evening fell over the city, I sat in the terminal watching other travelers, people carrying their entire lives in duffel. Bags and backpacks, heading toward new cities and new possibilities. I was one of them now, unmoored, uncertain, but finally completely free. The woman who boarded that Greyhound bus at 11:20 p.m. was a stranger to everyone, including herself. But strangers, I was beginning to understand, had unlimited potential for reinvention. Portland greeted me with a steady drizzle that matched my mood as I stepped off the Greyhound bus after 38 hours of fitful sleep and truck stop meals. The terminal was smaller than I'd expected, but the city beyond the windows looked exactly like the photos I'd studied during my research. Green, misty, and full of possibilities for someone willing to start over. My first priority was finding somewhere to stay that wouldn't drain my limited resources. The youth hostel in the Alberta Arts District accepted cash and asked no questions beyond checking my ID. The room I shared with 3 other women cost $28 a night, sustainable for about 3 weeks if I was careful with everything else. You running from something? Asked my bunkmate, a girl named River with purple hair and multiple piercings. She looked barely 20, but her eyes held the kind of world weariness that comes from hard experience. Running toward something? I replied, stowing my small bag in the shared locker. River nodded approvingly. Same difference, really. This city's full of people reinventing themselves. You'll fit right in. The next morning, I walked through downtown, Portland with my printed resume, hastily created at a copy shop using a fake email address and my maiden name, Talia Reeves. My work history was sparse by design. I couldn't risk Lucas tracking me down through employment records. I listed my college education, some generic administrative experience, and a fictional gap explained as caring for an elderly relative. The first 10 businesses I visited weren't hiring, or wanted extensive background checks I couldn't provide, or required skills I didn't have. By noon, my feet ached and my confidence was cracking. $6,000 felt like a fortune when I was planning my escape, but in a city where even basic apartments rented for $1,200 a month, it would disappear frighteningly fast. I was eating a $1 slice of pizza from a food cart when I noticed the Help Wanted sign in the window of Evergreen Books, a small independent bookstore tucked between a vintage clothing shop and a coffee roastery. The owner, a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, looked up from her inventory sheets when I walked in. I'm Sienna Walsh, she said, extending her hand. You're here about the job? Talia Reeves, I replied, handing her my resume. I saw your sign. I don't have bookstore experience specifically, but I've always loved reading, and I learn quickly. Sienna scanned my paperwork, then studied my face with the perceptiveness of someone who'd spent decades reading. People along with books. You're not from around here. Nevada, originally. I'm looking for a fresh start. She nodded slowly. This job doesn't pay much. $12 an hour to start, 25 hours a week maximum. It's enough to survive on if you're careful, but you won't get rich. I'm not looking to get rich, I said honestly. I just need a chance. Something in my tone must have resonated with her because she offered me the position on the spot. When can you start? Right now, if you need me to. Evergreen Books became my sanctuary over the following weeks. The work was simple: shelving, returns, helping customers find titles, processing online orders, but it provided structure and purpose during the most uncertain period of my life. Sienna was patient with my learning curve and seemed to understand that I needed the job for reasons beyond just earning money. You've got good instincts for recommendations, she told me after I'd helped a customer find the perfect gift for their book-loving teenager. Have you considered that maybe this work suits you? The thought hadn't occurred to me. For 12 years, I'd defined myself in relation to Lucas, as his wife, his support system, his designated worrier about finances and social obligations. The idea that I might have innate talents or preferences independent of him was revelatory. Evenings were harder. The hostel grew crowded and noisy as travelers returned from their daily adventures, full of stories about exploring waterfalls and microbreweries. I felt isolated among people who were in Portland for fun while I was there for survival. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, showed dozens of missed calls and increasingly frantic voicemails from Lucas. Talia, this is insane, he said in one message. Whatever game you're playing, it's gone on long enough. Come home and we'll work this out like adults. In another, I don't know what Monica said to you, but you're blowing this completely out of proportion. She was just trying to help when she called you. The most recent message was different, angrier. Fine. If you want to throw away 12 years over some misunderstanding, that's your choice. But don't expect me to wait around forever while you have your little breakdown. I deleted each voicemail without listening to the end. Lucas's words had lost their power to hurt me because they were directed at someone who no longer existed. The woman who would have crumbled at his disappointment was gone, replaced by someone who measured her worth by her ability to navigate an unfamiliar city, earn her own money, and build something new from nothing. 3 weeks into my Portland life, I signed the lease on a studio apartment in Southeast Division. It was tiny, barely 400 square feet, but it was mine. As I handed over the first month's rent and security deposit, I realized I had accomplished something I'd never done before, created a home that existed entirely outside of someone else's influence or approval. That night, sleeping on an air mattress, in my empty apartment, I felt more at peace than I had in years. 3 months into my Portland life, I was restocking the business section at Evergreen Books when a particular title caught my eye: Automotive Industry Analysis, Market Trends, and Future Projections. The irony wasn't lost on me. After fleeing everything connected to Lucas's world, I was drawn to a book about the very industry that had defined my old life. But as I flipped through the pages during my lunch break, I realized something unexpected. I understood it. Years of listening to Lucas discuss market fluctuations, dealer incentives, and consumer preferences had given me a foundation I'd never recognized. More importantly, I could see patterns and connections that the book's authors had missed. Interesting reading material, Sienna commented, noticing me absorbed in the text during a quiet afternoon. Planning a career change? Just curious, I replied, but the seed of an idea had been planted. That evening, I spent hours in the Portland Public Library, researching automotive market data with the same intensity I'd once applied to planning Lucas's business presentations. But this time, I was analyzing information for my own understanding, following threads of logic wherever they led, rather than shaping conclusions to support someone else's predetermined narrative. What I discovered was fascinating. The automotive industry was on the verge of massive disruption. Electric vehicles, changing consumer preferences, and new financing models were reshaping everything. Most traditional dealers were responding reactively, trying to protect existing profit margins rather than adapting to emerging opportunities. Began writing analysis pieces, initially just for my own understanding, but eventually developing them into comprehensive reports. My tiny apartment became filled with charts, graphs, and projections as I tracked industry trends with the obsession of someone who'd found their calling. "You should submit these somewhere," River suggested one evening, finding me surrounded by paperwork. She'd become a close friend despite our age difference, and her outsider's perspective often cut through my self-doubt. "This stuff is better than half the business articles I read online." I laughed off her suggestion initially, but it nagged at me. On impulse, I submitted one of my analyses to Auto Weekly, a trade publication I'd found during my research. The bite-sized piece explored how traditional luxury dealerships were failing to adapt to millennial buying preferences. 2 weeks later, I received an email that changed everything. "Ms. Reeves, we'd like to publish your submission and discuss potential freelance opportunities. Your insights into luxury market demographics are exactly what our readers need." The payment for my first published article was modest, $300, but it represented something invaluable. Proof that my thoughts and analysis had worth beyond supporting someone else's success. Auto Weekly's editor, a sharp woman named Diana Kraft, called personally to discuss additional assignments. "Your perspective is refreshing," she said during our phone conversation. "You understand the technical aspects but also grasp the human psychology behind purchase decisions. That combination is rare." Within 6 months, I was contributing regular columns to 3 different industry publications. The work was flexible enough to maintain my bookstore schedule while building a reputation in automotive journalism. More importantly, it was teaching me to trust my own insights and expertise. Sienna noticed the change in my confidence and made an unexpected offer. "I'm thinking of expanding our business section and maybe hosting some author events. Would you be interested in managing that project? It would mean more hours and a raise." The promotion felt like validation of something I'd never believed about myself, that I was capable of growth, leadership, and independent success. As I accepted Sienna's offer, I realized that the woman Lucas had dismissed as pathetic and dependent was becoming someone neither of us had imagined possible. The call came on a rainy Thursday afternoon while I was organizing a book signing event for a local author. Diana Kraft from Auto Weekly sounded unusually excited when I answered. "Talia, I have an opportunity that could change everything for you," she said without preamble. "Have you heard of Alden Sterling?" I had. Sterling was the founder and CEO of Sterling Automotive Group, a rapidly expanding chain of luxury dealerships across the Pacific Northwest. His aggressive acquisition strategy and innovative marketing approaches had made him something of a legend in the industry. "He read your piece on electric vehicle adoption in luxury markets," Diana continued. "Specifically, your analysis of why traditional dealers are missing the transition opportunity. He wants to meet with you." My heart stopped. "Meet with me? Why?" "Sterling's planning a major expansion into California, but he's concerned about market entry strategy. He thinks you might have insights his current consultants are missing. This could be huge, Talia. He's offering $5,000 for a comprehensive market analysis with potential for ongoing consulting work." $5,000 was more than I made in 3 months at the bookstore. But beyond the money, this represented something I'd never dared imagine. Recognition as an expert in my own right, not just someone's assistant or supporter. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at Sterling's flagship dealership in downtown Portland. I spent days preparing, creating the most thorough market analysis I'd ever attempted. I researched every luxury dealer in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego, analyzing their strengths, weaknesses, and market positioning. I identified gaps in electric vehicle services, demographic shifts in luxury car buying, and opportunities for innovative financing approaches. Sterling Automotive Group's headquarters was everything I'd expected from a successful luxury operation: gleaming showroom floors, impeccably dressed staff, and vehicles that cost more than most people's annual salaries. But I felt surprisingly calm as I waited in the reception area, my analysis bound professionally and loaded on my laptop. Alden Sterling was younger than I'd expected, probably mid-40s, with the kind of confident energy that successful entrepreneurs radiate. He greeted me personally rather than sending an assistant, which I appreciated. "Ms. Reeves," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Diana speaks very highly of your work. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the California market." For the next 2 hours, I presented my findings with a confidence that surprised even me. I explained how most luxury dealers were underestimating the speed of electric vehicle adoption, particularly among environmentally conscious California buyers. I showed him demographic data revealing that traditional luxury marketing was missing younger, tech-savvy consumers who valued sustainability alongside status. But the breakthrough moment came when I identified something his current consultants had missed: a gap in the pre-owned electric luxury vehicle market. Most dealers were treating electric cars as short-term inventory, not understanding their long-term value retention or the growing demand for certified pre-owned electric vehicles. "This is exactly what I needed to hear," Sterling said, leaning back in his chair. "My current advisors keep telling me to stick with traditional approaches, but your analysis shows why that's exactly wrong for this market." He offered me the consulting contract on the spot, but then added something unexpected. "I'm also looking for someone to lead market research for the California expansion. Would you consider relocating to Los Angeles to head up that division?" The offer was staggering: a 6-figure salary, relocation assistance, and the chance to build something from the ground up. As I sat in Sterling's office, looking out at the Portland skyline, I realized this was the moment my new life truly began. The woman who had fled Nevada in shame was about to become an automotive industry executive in California. Los Angeles sprawled before me like a glittering promise as my plane descended into LAX 6 weeks later. Sterling Automotive Group had relocated me with an efficiency that still amazed me: corporate housing in a sleek downtown apartment, a company car, and a relocation bonus that erased any lingering financial anxiety from my escape from Nevada. First day at Sterling's West Coast headquarters felt surreal. The gleaming office tower in Century City housed not just dealerships, but a growing empire of automotive ventures. I had my own office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a far cry from the shared workspace at Evergreen Books just months earlier. "Welcome to the big leagues," said Everett Chen, Sterling's director of operations, as she showed me around the facilities. Despite sharing a surname with my ex-husband's family name that I'd deliberately avoided, Everett quickly became both a mentor and friend. Her sharp business acumen and no-nonsense approach reminded me that success in this industry required both intelligence and resilience. My California market analysis had been even more successful than anticipated. The 3 dealership locations I'd identified were acquired within 60 days, and early sales figures exceeded projections by 30%. Sterling credited my research with preventing costly mistakes his previous consultants had recommended. "You have an unusual gift," he told me during my 3-month review. "You see patterns that others miss, and more importantly, you understand the human psychology behind the data. That's rare in this business." The promotion to Director of Strategic Development came with another substantial salary increase and expanded responsibilities. I was now overseeing market research for Sterling's entire West Coast expansion, managing a team of analysts, and presenting directly to the board of directors. But the most unexpected development was personal. Dr. Sonny Martinez, no relation, to Lucas's friend who had participated in the fake repo scheme, was a corporate attorney specializing in automotive dealership acquisitions. We met during due diligence for a major acquisition in San Diego, where his expertise in dealer franchise law complemented my market analysis. Sonny was everything Lucas hadn't been: intellectually curious, genuinely supportive of my career ambitions, and secure enough in his own success that he celebrated mine rather than feeling threatened by it. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared professional interests, rather than the desperate dependence that had characterized my marriage. "You're different from anyone I've met in this industry," he told me over dinner, one evening, 6 months after we'd started dating. "Most people here are either trying to prove something or protect something. You're actually building something." The observation struck me as profound. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't defining myself in reaction to someone else's expectations or limitations. I was creating my own path, making my own choices, and succeeding on my own terms. When Sterling offered me a partnership track position with equity in the company, I accepted without hesitation. The woman who had once been grateful for Lucas's attention was now being courted by one of the most successful automotive entrepreneurs on the West Coast. 2 years after fleeing Nevada with $6,000 and a broken heart, I was earning more money than Lucas had ever dreamed of, living in a city that energized rather than stifled me, and building a relationship based on equality rather than dependence. The transformation was so complete that when I occasionally caught my reflection in my office windows, I sometimes didn't recognize the confident woman looking back at me. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly performance reports in my Century City office. It landed in my professional inbox with the subject line, "Partnership Opportunity, Morrison Motors, Nevada," and seeing that name after 3 years felt like a physical blow. Morrison Motors, Lucas's dealership, still using his family name despite his obvious mismanagement. I stared at the sender's address, a business development firm called Pinnacle Automotive Solutions, and felt my carefully constructed new life suddenly intersect with the past I'd left behind. "Everything okay?" Sonny asked, noticing my expression as he entered my office for our lunch meeting. We'd been together for over a year now, but I'd never told him the complete truth about my previous marriage. He knew I was divorced, that I'd left Nevada after a difficult relationship, but not the specific details of Lucas's betrayal or the fake repo scheme. "Just an unexpected email," I replied, minimizing the message. "Nothing urgent." But curiosity gnawed at me throughout lunch. By the time Sonny returned to his own office, I found myself reopening the email and reading it completely. The message was professionally written but desperate between the lines. Morrison Motors was seeking investment partners for expansion into luxury vehicle sales. They claimed to have identified significant market opportunities but needed capital injection and strategic guidance from industry leaders to move forward. Attached was a business proposal that would have been laughable if it weren't so pathetic. Lucas had clearly learned nothing about market analysis or financial planning in the 3 years since I'd left. His projections were wildly optimistic, his market research was superficial, and his financial statements showed a business barely surviving month to month. More telling were the subtle hints throughout the document that suggested desperation. References to time-sensitive opportunities, mentions of recent setbacks requiring immediate action, and requests for meetings at the earliest possible convenience painted a picture of a man drowning in his own incompetence. I found myself researching Morrison Motors online, discovering that Lucas's business had struggled significantly since my departure. Online reviews complained about poor customer service, unreliable financing arrangements, and a general decline in the dealership's reputation. Several former employees had left negative Glassdoor reviews describing a toxic work environment and erratic management. The most interesting discovery was a local news article from 8 months earlier, Local dealership faces fraud investigation after customer complaints. The piece detailed how Morrison Motors had been accused of manipulating loan applications and misrepresenting vehicle conditions to buyers. While charges were ultimately dropped due to insufficient evidence, the investigation had clearly damaged their credibility. Talia? Everett appeared in my doorway, holding her own laptop. I just got a strange call from a business development firm asking about partnership opportunities. They mentioned they'd already contacted you directly? I looked up from my research. Pinnacle Automotive Solutions? That's them. They're representing a Nevada dealership that wants to partner with Sterling Automotive Group for some kind of expansion project. The caller seemed particularly interested in setting up a meeting with you specifically. My blood ran cold. They asked for me by name, said they'd researched our West Coast operations team, and felt you'd be the ideal person to evaluate their proposal. They claimed to have followed your work in the trade publications. Lucas had found me. After 3 years of building a new life, creating a new identity, and establishing myself as Talia Reeves rather than Talia Morrison, my past had tracked me down through my own professional success. The irony was bitter. My expertise in the automotive industry, expertise I'd developed partly to escape him, had made me visible enough for him to locate me. The very accomplishments that represented my freedom had created a trail leading back to the man who'd tried to destroy me. But as the initial shock wore off, I felt something unexpected. Curiosity rather than fear. The woman Lucas had abandoned. In that parking lot would have panicked, but the woman I'd become was intrigued by the possibilities this presented. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at Sterling's Beverly Hills showroom, our most prestigious location. I chose the venue deliberately. Surrounded by vehicles worth more than Lucas's entire annual revenue, the power dynamic would be unmistakably clear from the moment he walked through the door. I arrived early to prepare, wearing a tailored Armani suit that cost more than I used to spend on clothes in 6 months. My hair was styled by the same team that worked with Hollywood executives, and my confidence had been honed by 3 years of commanding boardrooms filled with industry veterans. The woman Lucas would encounter bore no resemblance to the one he'd humiliated in that parking lot. Everett positioned herself at the reception desk to observe, while Sunny waited in an adjacent office in case I needed support. Neither knew the full story, but they understood this meeting was more than a routine business consultation. At exactly 2 p.m., Pinnacle Automotive's representative entered with his client. Lucas looked older than his 42 years, his hair thinning and his once confident posture replaced by the nervous energy of a man accustomed to rejection. He was accompanied by a woman I didn't recognize, a middle-aged professional who introduced herself as Sarah Kim from Pinnacle. "Mr. Morrison," Sarah said, gesturing toward me, "I'd like you to meet Talia Reeves, Director of Strategic Development for Sterling Automotive Group. Ms. Reeves will be evaluating your proposal." The recognition wasn't immediate. 3 years had transformed me so completely that Lucas initially saw only another automotive executive. He extended his hand with a practiced sales smile, launching into his rehearsed introduction. "Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Reeves. I'm Lucas Morrison, owner of Morrison Motors in Henderson, Nevada. I appreciate you taking the time to consider our expansion proposal." I shook his hand, noting how soft it had become. The hands of someone who'd grown comfortable while his business declined around him. "Mr. Morrison, please have a seat." As we settled around the conference table, I opened the portfolio containing his business proposal, taking my time to review documents I'd already analyzed thoroughly. The silence stretched until Lucas began fidgeting, his sales instincts apparently dulled by desperation. "As you can see," he began, "Morrison Motors has identified significant opportunities in the luxury vehicle market. We believe a partnership with Sterling Automotive Group could—" He stopped mid-sentence, his face going pale as the truth finally registered. The confident businessman's mask slipped away, replaced by shock and dawning horror. "Talia?" His voice cracked on my name. Sarah Kim looked between us with confusion. I'm sorry. Do you two know each other? We have a prior acquaintance, I replied calmly, maintaining eye contact with Lucas. Mr. Morrison and I crossed paths several years ago. Small world, isn't it? Lucas appeared to be struggling with basic cognitive functions. His mouth opened and closed without producing sound, and his hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the table. How are you? He stammered. I'm very well, thank you, I replied with professional courtesy. I understand. You're seeking partnership opportunities for expansion into luxury vehicle sales. Why don't you tell me more about your current operations and what specific expertise you bring to this proposed venture? The question was standard business procedure, but Lucas seemed incapable of shifting back into professional mode. He stared at me as if I were a ghost, which in many ways, I suppose I was. The ghost of the woman he'd tried to destroy returned, in a form he couldn't have imagined. Sarah Kim attempted to salvage the meeting by stepping in with prepared talking points, but Lucas remained frozen, his carefully planned presentation crumbling in the face of encountering the woman who had vanished from his life 3 years ago. The reunion he'd engineered had just become his nightmare. Sarah Kim's professional composure began cracking as the tension in the room became unbearable. Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting, she suggested, glancing nervously between Lucas and me. Mr. Morrison seems to be having some kind of medical episode. No, I said firmly, never breaking eye contact with Lucas. I think we should continue. Mr. Morrison came here seeking a business partnership. I'd like to understand exactly what he's offering. Lucas finally found his voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. Talia, I don't understand. How are you here? Where have you been? We filed a missing person report. You filed a missing person report? I repeated, allowing a note of surprise to enter my voice. How considerate. After leaving me stranded at a car dealership with a fake repo notice, you were concerned about my welfare? Sarah Kim's eyes widened. Whatever background research Pinnacle had done on Sterling Automotive Group, they clearly hadn't uncovered the personal connection between their client and their target executive. Fake repo notice? Sarah asked, looking at Lucas with alarm. Mr. Morrison, what is she talking about? Lucas's face flushed red. It wasn't. You don't understand the context. Then explain it, I said, leaning back in my chair. With the calm authority I'd developed over 3 years of high-stakes negotiations. Explain to Ms. Kim how you and your friends staged a fake repossession in a public parking lot to humiliate your wife so thoroughly that she wouldn't fight you, when you asked for a divorce. Your wife? Sarah Kim turned to Lucas with shock. You told us you were divorced years ago. I am divorced, Lucas said quickly, then caught himself. I mean, we're separated. It's complicated. Actually, it's quite simple, I interjected. Mr. Morrison planned an elaborate scheme to publicly humiliate me, expecting that I would be so broken by the experience that I'd accept whatever divorce terms he offered. What he didn't anticipate was that his plan would backfire so spectacularly. I opened my laptop and pulled up Morrison Motors' financial statements, which I'd analyzed thoroughly since receiving his proposal. Sarah, I think you should know that your client's business is in severe financial distress. His proposal requests significant capital investment, but his own documentation shows consistent losses over the past 3 years. Lucas found his voice again, desperation making him aggressive. You disappeared. You vanished without a word, leaving me to deal with police investigations and worried family members. Do you have any idea what you put everyone through? What I put everyone through? I stood up, my voice remaining calm but carrying steel underneath. Lucas, let me be very clear about what actually happened. You orchestrated a cruel public humiliation designed to break my spirit so completely that I would accept being discarded like a used car trade-in. Your plan succeeded. It did break something in me. It broke my willingness to accept less than I deserve. Sarah Kim was frantically taking notes, probably realizing that her firm had walked into a potential legal nightmare. "You want to know where I've been?" I continued. "I've been building the expertise you clearly lack. While your business declined due to mismanagement, I was learning how successful automotive operations actually function. While you struggled with basic market analysis, I was becoming the kind of strategic thinker that companies like Sterling seek out." I gestured toward the luxury vehicles visible through the showroom windows. "You came here seeking partnership with Sterling Automotive Group because you heard about our success. What you didn't realize is that some of that success came from insights I developed after leaving your failing operation behind." Lucas stared at me, finally understanding the complete reversal of our positions. The consulting work, the trade, publications. That was you? That was me. Talia Reeves, automotive industry analyst. The woman you left in that parking lot thinking she was too pathetic to survive on her own. The truth settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Sarah Kim excused herself to make phone calls, clearly distancing her firm from what had become a personal confrontation rather than a business meeting. Lucas sat alone across from me, the wreckage of his assumptions scattered around him like debris from a collision he'd caused but never seen coming. The silence stretched between us as Sarah Kim's footsteps faded down the hallway. Lucas slumped in his chair, the fight drained out of him as the full scope of his miscalculation became clear. Through the showroom windows, I could see Everett and Sonny maintaining professional distance while keeping a protective eye on the situation. "I need to ask you something," Lucas said finally, his voice hollow. "The Repo scheme. You knew, didn't you? You knew before it happened." I considered lying, maintaining some illusion that might preserve his ego. But the woman I'd become had no patience for protecting the feelings of someone who'd shown me none. "I found your emails with Monica 3 days before your birthday surprise. I knew everything, the fake paperwork, your friend's participation, your plan to use my humiliation to justify a divorce that would leave me with nothing." His face crumpled. "Then why didn't you just confront me? Why disappear completely?" "Because confronting you would have required me to fight for a marriage that had already been dead for years. I realized I didn't want to save what we had. I wanted to discover what I could become without it." Lucas laughed bitterly. "And look what you became. Everything I could never be." "No," I corrected him. "I became everything I always was. But that you never bothered to see. The capacity was always there, Lucas. You just convinced me it wasn't worth developing." I closed his business proposal and slid it across the table. "Your partnership request is denied. Morrison Motors doesn't meet Sterling's standards for strategic alliances, not financially, operationally, or ethically." "Talia, please. It's—" "Ms. Reeves," I interrupted. "And this meeting is over." But Lucas didn't move. Instead, he leaned forward, his desperation palpable. "What happened to Monica?" The question surprised me. "I have no idea. After I left Nevada, your personal life ceased to be my concern. She left 6 months after you disappeared, said the pressure was too much, that dating a man whose wife had vanished was too complicated. She took a job in Phoenix." He paused. "The business has been struggling ever since. I guess you were handling more than I realized." I felt nothing at this revelation. No satisfaction, no vindication, just the mild interest one might have in hearing about distant acquaintances. The man who had once controlled my emotional state so completely now seemed like a character from someone else's story. Standing up, I gathered my materials with the efficient movements of someone whose time was valuable. "I'm sorry your business is failing, Lucas. Genuinely. But it's not my problem to solve." What am I supposed to do now? The question hung in the air between us. The final plea of a man who had spent years taking for granted the very support system he'd worked to destroy. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing not the confident manipulator who had orchestrated my humiliation, but simply a middle-aged man who had made catastrophically poor choices and was finally facing their consequences. You figure it out, I said simply. The same way I did when you left me in that parking lot with nothing. You adapt, you learn, you build something new, or you don't. But either way, you do it without me. I walked toward the door, then paused. Lucas? That day at Premier Auto Plaza, when you and your friends were laughing as you drove away, you told me to find my way home. I want you to know that I did. Just not to the one I shared with you. As I left him sitting alone in that conference room, surrounded by luxury vehicles he could never afford and evidence of a success he could never achieve, I felt the final weight of our shared past lift from my shoulders. The woman who walked out of that showroom was completely, irrevocably free, not because she had gotten revenge, but because she had gotten something infinitely more valuable, a life that belonged entirely to her. 3 hours later, I was in Sonny's car, driving toward our home in the Hollywood Hills, where a bottle of champagne waited to celebrate Sterling's latest acquisition. The past had been acknowledged, faced, and finally laid to rest. In my purse sat the keys to my own Lamborghini Aventador, the midnight black one I'd purchased the previous month, not as a symbol of revenge against Lucas, but as a celebration of my own success. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. But the best victory is discovering you no longer need revenge at all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.